If we look at urgency and scarcity as a principle of persuasion, urgency, which is a form of scarcity, drives action. And that doesn't just mean for buying or, selling things. If you think back to high school, if you're anything like me, you'll have probably been given homework or an assignment at some point, and you'll have been given 2 weeks to do it. And throughout those 2 weeks, you could have easily broken down the task into manageable chunks. Do a little bit, 20 minutes on it this day, 20 minutes on it the next day. But if you're anything like me, you'll have probably left it until the night before, the day before that is actually due in, and then out of nowhere, got this massive burst of energy to suddenly complete this assignment, and maybe you do have to stay up all night, but it gets done and it gets handed in the next day. And that right there is called urgency. And urgency is a form of scarcity, and basically what it means is that a limited time on something will drive demand to do something. So that's just an example of how that works in, your day-to-day life. But if we look at scarcity, scarcity is even more powerful because it creates a limited number of things. And when something is in limited number or limited supply, what that implies is that other people can potentially buy that or get that as well, which creates this competition environment. And humans are very competitive creatures. So if you think about scarcity, it basically drilled into your brain in a persuasive nature from two angles. One, you've already got kind of the urgency on the situation to take action, but secondly as well, you actually want to outcompete the other person and make sure somebody else doesn't get it as well. You want whatever that is. And it applies to booking slots. So what Dan has done here seemingly is create a false sense of scarcity to drive people to book calls. And they've done that by enabling an option on their funnel which says we need to look busy, right? We need to have certain slots taken, certain times of day that you can't book. Right, and we're doing that because we don't want to seem overly available. When you appear overly available, there is no urgency driving you to take an action. And the reason this works so much is that things which are in shorter supply or on urgent time frame, basically in the human mind, get perceived as more valuable. This isn't my opinion. There's an actual study which demonstrates this. Here's a study on the effects of supply and demand on ratings of object value, and it's by Warchel, Lee, Adewole, sorry guys if I didn't pronounce your name right, in 1975. And in this study there were 2 jars of cookies. Both of the cookies were absolutely identical. They were the same cookie. Both tasted exactly the same, they looked exactly the same, except in both of these jars, there was a different number of cookies. In jar 1, there was 10 cookies. In jar 2, there was 2 cookies. The participants were asked which jar had the most desirable cookies in, the most valuable cookies, the most attractive cookies. And basically, even though the quality of each of them did not differ, even though the taste didn't differ, the participants rated that the 2 cookies in jar 1 were actually far more appealing than the cookies in jar 2, which is where they had 10, even though they were the same cookies, same flavor, same lookalike. And the only reason for this is because when something is in fewer quantity or on a more urgent time frame, we judge that thing as more valuable. So when we come back to the question of is this a shady marketing tactic? What do you think of practices from businesses that do things like this? I do have to say, most businesses, unfortunately, do practice things like this. They will create false urgency, false scarcity, and they will do this in the hope that you take action from it. Most businesses do it. Doesn't mean it's right that they do it, because there are ethical ways to put urgency and scarcity in your marketing without basically artificially inflating it. One way is to do program launches instead. So that is one of the most effective ways, because basically you can say to your audience or your email list or the people who are visiting your website, hey, look, my program is only open from the 10th of Feb to the 17th of February. In that 7-day period, if you don't buy then, I'm not sure again when it's going to be open, which might be a realistic scenario. You only want to take in cohorts of people at one time. When you do something like that, you on average see quite a big % jump in how many people actually buy in that time frame, because urgency and scarcity are automatically involved in a very ethical way. You could also say as well, hey, I'm going to do a coaching program, but rather than have the time frame, the little time gap of when you're going to open it for, you could say, I'm only looking to take on X number of people in that time, which again sprinkles in the cognitive bias of urgency and scarcity, making it more appealing, and it's perfectly ethical. If you have got a booking system like Dan has got here, you can artificially, make yourself look busy, or you could just give your closers a day off on certain days or allocate them to other tasks. Like, we don't take calls on Tuesday morning, or we don't take calls on Wednesday night because you're doing something else. You're working your CRM and sending things out at that point there, which is an ethical way of doing it rather than like tricking the end user. However, I've got a feeling that they have actually seen this thread and removed that bit of code from it, because now the call booking seems to be laid out perfectly fine, right? Is the 30th of December today, and it seems to have all the available time slots there. Another ethical way of generating urgency or scarcity when you have your booking calendar is to only, which is what they've done here, only limit it for the next few days. I found from the research that I've done, where I have been booking calls for myself, for my own business, over the last few years, and also when I've been consulting with Persuasion for various different companies, I found that if you have your calendar open more than 4 days in advance, meaning that people can book pretty much any time into the future, the people who do book out of that 4-day window, let's just say Dan's calendar is open all the way down to the end of January here, right? And you can book any time in that period. The people who book after those 4 days, 90% of them no show for the people who book outside of that window. Because what happens is the iron goes cold when they've got a problem, they have decided to take action on it, and then they've suddenly got a call in 3 weeks' time and they forget, right? The problem's not that painful anymore. They've kind of moved on a little bit in life. And also as well, if you think about it, if they really have got no time, other than in 2 weeks' time, is it really that much of a problem to them? It's not really a burning problem, in which case they probably won't close anyway. However, the people who book within that 4-day window, generally 90% of the time they will show up because they want the problem dealt with right then. So my recommendation to create that urgency, to create that scarcity ethically, is to do exactly what Dan has done here, which is just open that calendar up for just a few day period, so that people they have to find a time, basically. If they want to speak to you, they have to find a time within that 4-day period to actually speak to you, right?